collect on Leon's bounty. Then I say we head north.
You think shit's any different up north?
This new generation is bringing a great deal of changes, leaps and methods to which we play and experience our games. With my packed PS5 coverage kicking off on Friday, I've covered as much of all this with the attempt to keep you as spoiler free as possible for your very own first time. Now, from my console review, controller, games and that Paradigm SSD and centralized I/O, I take a change here and dive into a new take on a very old element of games. Right from the start, in fact, backwards compatibility. Now, this was given back in the late 70s and early 80s, with even the ColecoVision being able to play Atari VCS titles before Atari itself could do that on its own 5200. But here with the PS5, you can not only play your old games on the new console, you can unleash them even more. But how good is the PS5 retro play? I'm here to give you all the answers, and maybe some you never asked. So let's dive into our backlog booster. First up, all old titles will not utilise the central I/O system and newer APIs fully or even at all, as they are not written for it. This is not to say the new hardware cannot improve them, just that it is only a small percentage of that potential available within the core boosts, such as the CPU, the raw SSD speed and bandwidth. This is also true of the new 36CU RDNA2 based GPU and that much faster, larger 16GB of GDDR6 RAM, as, for all intents, it runs these older games in a GCN emulation mode and may only run at the same frequencies if compatibility requires. Some games actually touch on this. Also note that unless devs unlocked the frame rate to start with or ran a dynamic resolution, you will not be able to push past those base limits here. A 1080-30 game will still top out at the same level unless teams release patches, which I covered in detail already in my previous development videos. Link is in the description below. Some of the games tested here out of the box as they come. Some of them have downloads, some have free patches ahead of launch to enable the hardware to be used more, but still all in a GCN compatibility mode. Brand new games such as Spider-Man Miles Morales with its ray trace reflections show the possibilities to come. That game runs at a 30 and 60 FPS frame rate. It's pretty much locked across the board. Now, they say don't look back, but it is not always bad when the future's this bright. Now, first up is an older title, but one that ticks all the boxes for run what you brung testing. Unlocked from the off and capped at 1080p, the PS4 release rarely strayed north of 30 FPS. Even the pros struggled to break out of that realm in many boost mode tests, managing a small 16% increase over the base PS4, even with twice the GPU throughput and CUs. The leap to PS5 is as transformative as you could hope for. What was a very poor performer often on both last-gen consoles is now at or very close to 60 FPS most of the time. Aside those frame shot changes for vast geometry and draw call shifts, the game only dips to 33 or 49 milliseconds at certain points. Some dense triangle loads, depth of field or just odd bugs at times can cause 33 millisecond spikes, and some of these, the common dense context and cache flush at scene change, again persist. Even then, the average is over 58 FPS, meaning we see a massive increase in performance by 265% on the lows and over 230% on average alone. Yeah, it's 1080p, but it still shows just how good 1080-60 is for a game's visual impact. But some of those dips are GPU related, which means in all likelihood these very old games on early SDKs are reverting to more compatible clocks and CU allocations. The next almost launched game also displays a similar trend in AC Unity. There's no secret right back at launch in my coverage on the Xbox and PS4 version that the PS4 version was behind, confirmed by my 2 UK launch copies I still own here, being 1.048 I think on the Xbox and 1.0 respectively on the PS4. This means my UK edition with the extra missions is capped at 30 on the Xbox, whereas my PS4 copy is not, but it has far more bugs and higher effect quality, such as the depth of field and alpha effects. Now on base consoles, the performance in memory use, CPU is all really caching issues and all those kind of bug areas that are consistent with the early launch title. Extreme leaps in hardware only go so far if inherent issues remain, which they do from this disk code. It's the same here on the PS5, with it still doubling performance, but at that exact same 900p, it is clearly not GPU or fill rate limited. Just as we see in the previous game, I suspect the combination of engine issues at the time and the CPU not running at full clocks, with the GPU also likely running in that 18 CU and 800 MHz mode here to conform to hardware BC for ease. It also shows in the game having a warning on issues at times which come from the cutscenes not working at all because you can't skip them, the button doesn't work, likely some kind of cycle interrupt or polling issue. Now the result is in 99% of gameplay we see a locked 60 FPS, but at points in cutscenes or heavier streaming it can judder and dip below. Updating to the latest patches sees a perfect performing 30 FPS, but for the slight hiccups I will take the dirty disc version at 60 FPS because both of them are 900p and generally in play it just feels so much better. So let's stop for a minute and talk about what I mean by those 18 CUs and reduced clocks. Like I say, Microsoft have a higher level of abstraction. They're managing this almost like a PC on their console, where the same game can run across multiple pieces of devices, and therefore that you gain much better utilization of the GPU and CPU. On the PS4, they've not done that because they have a lower level of API and SDK, therefore they can get stuck into the hardware a little better and bypass some of the basic functionality, which means you either spend more time creating an emulator or you do what they've done, which is have a hardware fallback, hardware emulation. And that means that where you've got the full-size GPU, let's take the 36 CU of the PS5, it has effectively 3 modes. It runs in the full fat mode, therefore 2.3 GHz, all 36 CUs in a GCN compatibility mode, which mirrors the wavefront and the allocations, the cache use, so that you don't get those weird and wonderful errors. Or it reverts, if there's a pro mode, to the pro mode. So it means it runs at 36 CUs, but only at 911 MHz. And then if none of those things are true, it reverts to PS4 mode, which I think both of these games are running at, just covered, and that actually drops right down to 18 CUs running at 800 MHz. So you can see even at the same CU and clock rate, it still has much higher performance. This is not fact, this is what's most likely happening based on all the information that's out there in the public eye from PlayStation themselves. What this means is that it reverts between these modes as best it can. Even the full PS5 mode is not utilizing the hardware fully. Remember, it's a GCN compatibility mode. It will run games better than the original GCN at that level, but it doesn't mean it's utilizing all the additional functionality that comes with the PS5, such as the geometry engine, ray tracing, the splitting off of the wavefronts, all those kind of elements I'm not going to dig into here. And it will just shift up and down between those different modes dependent on the game, how old it is. And therefore, you're not going to get full fat performance out of every single title because it depends on which mode it's going to revert to in this stack. One title that's definitely using the 3 mode and has recently been patched is Days Gone. I covered this in my previous PS4 patches video, and this enhanced some of the texture quality compression by reducing the footprint by almost 60%, and that covers for the PS4 as well, but also improving the performance, unlocking it here and pushing it up to 60 FPS on the PS4. Now again, there are a couple of dips, again during cuts from cinematics from one geometry load to another, the standard stuff that you get in many titles. Now this again isn't using the full power of the PS5, it is using the full mode 3 most likely to get the best out of that GCN backwards compatibility. That means we see the same checkerboard 4K resolution, but instead of running at 30 FPS, it now runs at 60 FPS. Loading is improved, speed of the game is improved, but overall it's the same title, but released, unleashed and running at that 16 millisecond refresh rate. It feels transformative to play, and because it's a vast open world game with so much going on, it actually is a great improvement, specifically for free, by going back to your old title, whacking in the disc and then playing it out of the box. Remember, you do need to patch this one if you've got the disc version to get the 60 FPS mode. You won't have it straight out of the box because it was never unlocked there. There doesn't appear to be any other enhancements on the title. It appears to be bog standard, which is great, don't get me wrong, it's a beautiful looking game, but other than the 60 FPS mode, it looks to be rendering the same methods, and this is all borne out by the depth of field having that slight stretched, blurry look, which I covered way back with my Horizon Zero Dawn analysis, which uses checkerboarding as well. So that element of the title still is present, but it's a crisp, sharp image, now running much better with a double the temporal resolution due to the fact it now runs at 16 milliseconds rather than 33. And again, in the heavier sections with the horde mode and the zombies, as I've tested here, it doesn't skip a beat. It's 60 FPS throughout combat, action, traversal and exploration. And again, that is a huge leap forward in terms of getting free benefits to your older titles. In another tale of dreams coming true is The Last Guardian. Finally, it is given the power it needs to run at that full, almost, or just over, 1800p resolution, just shy of 4K, but it pretty much looks like 4K. Now running fully fledged up to 60 FPS. Not only running at 60 FPS, it's pretty much a locked 60 FPS. It's a transformation in terms of throughput and performance here compared to the Pro model, and the PS4 version is arguably just as bad. One of the standout titles for the PS4 generation, and Fumito Ueda's classic title that really carries that impact, that innocence and the realms and the mystery of all those adventures that Trico and Shadow of the Colossus. Here though, on the PS5, it can almost triple perform. What it does, it triples performance at points between the two. Whatever mode it's running, it's irrelevant. It's 60 FPS pretty much locked, and it was sub 30 FPS more often than not on the Pro. You could run it at 1080p and get better performance. It still was nowhere near 60. And this is really what this next generation is about. This is one of the best titles of it. Like I say, 3 times the performance levels, hardly any dips at all, and you can see the delta in performance between both consoles. You don't really need the graph to see just how big a difference this title actually makes. And now it's so much more enjoyable to play that I'm literally restarting a whole playthrough all over again because I love it that much. It really transforms the title because performance was bad. It was really bad on the title, and it can hinder you at certain points. Taking me right back to the PS2 days when Shadow of the Colossus came out, and that was terribly performing as well because they just pushed the performance of the console just too hard. It's done it again here. And this doesn't stop here. There's even more titles that do this. So Ghost of Tsushima now is fully unlocked, pushed to 60 FPS. There is no issues at all here. There's a couple of dips every now and then, like in many titles. It's very hard to get fully locked when you're syncing it to VSync. So some of these dips, don't get carried away. They're not to do with hardware limiting what can be delivered. They're actually just the fact that it's limiting to 60 FPS, 60 milliseconds. So occasionally you get some stutters, some skips. I do advise you go to the latest version. 1.14 I noticed had a couple of skips and judders that were more common. You can see it here at the beginning of this level. Now remember, this is pre-launch, so there might be other patches still to come and ones that are actually being updated as we speak. So there might be a couple more patches for some of these titles just to iron out little areas where they're utilising the extra power of the new console and just trying to get the best throughput. But this is still the same 3200 by 1800, likely using the same checkerboard solution to get there. It looks as crisp and sharp and clean as ever, but now running at 60 FPS. That temporal resolution increase makes the game look sharper because you get less swap and hold images for your screen. You actually just refresh at the same times as your screen, so it looks cleaner, it looks sharper, even at the same resolution. But more importantly, it feels and flows much better, and that's vital for a strong input title like this. So you really do benefit from playing this in 60 FPS. I said that when I covered the title on the original analysis. It's superb and it feels transformative at points in combat. And it holds on to that 60 FPS, as you can see here from the famous E3 section that I've replicated on one of my older saves, to give you a view of just how solid and performant it is. It looks as beautiful as ever, as solid as ever, and there's no better reason to dive into your backlog and finish these games off if you haven't, or, like me, if someone you want to revisit, then go back and play them all over again and just reimagine them in this better, improved format. It really isn't something you can complain about because it's all being done for free.
Just to get that monk.
And there's many other titles that do this. So Sekiro is now, again, 1800p, likely, I think it's a checkerboard solution. I can't remember off the top of my head when I covered these titles. I think it's checkerboarding, I'm not sure, maybe reconstruction. But again, it's now fully locked 60 FPS. The best performing From Software title on consoles now by far. Dark Souls 3 will likely be exactly the same now, but this is performing brilliantly in terms of clarity of image and smoothness of action. No dips at all recorded in these tested sections, and comparing it against the Pro, again, you're looking at somewhere around 50 to 100% performance improvements. The averages all sum up, and at the end of the video I'll give you analysis of the overall averages and some high points and low points in terms of the comparisons. But Sekiro is another title that you just have to jump back in. I've just been relishing the fact that I'm playing a lot of these old titles. It will diminish, it will wear out, of course. This isn't the mainstay of the new generation, but in these early periods where there's not a huge amount of titles to play, and over the Christmas period, I do think it's a good motivation to go back and clear out your backlog. And Sekiro is one that, you know, is very, very challenging and very hard, and it always helps to get a few vital milliseconds back in input latency, and this version on the PS5 does more than just that. So certainly, if you've got it in your collection, whack it out, stick it in. It plays like this straight out of the box, but even the latest patches don't remove the 60 FPS option on there. It's uncapped straight out of the gate. So go ahead, play the game, and enjoy it. And Jedi Fallen Order is another one, now running at 60 FPS, pretty much locked. There's a couple of skips for streaming points, but nothing major at all. You wouldn't really notice it aside this kind of fame graph. But it is 1080p. There are points in the title where it can even be 900p still, because that dynamic solution, the performance mode for the PS4 Pro, means that it looks like it sometimes forces it to 900p in some of the action sections. So don't expect that everything just to be 1080p across the board, but it now runs at a locked 60 FPS, and as I covered in depth, this was a terribly performing title, and now again it's completely transformed. It now feels completely different. What would be beautiful is if they managed to respawn, or EA managed to force out a patch that just unlocks the performance level on that full 4K mode, and then you'd get 4K 60, pretty much sure of it. It wouldn't be an issue at all. The huge leap in CPU and GPU power here is being utilised to deliver much better performance across the board, and by boosting it to the highest levels it could run on the consoles, and this will work again for the Series X as well, I think it would just enhance the impact this game has and draw people back into playing. It's absolutely brilliant, and the fact that it just, you know, perfectly merges that Sekiro, Dark Souls, Bloodborne style of gameplay we've just covered into the Jedi Star Wars order, and it works brilliantly. One of my standout titles of the generation. I absolutely love this game. I think it really brings me back to the original joys of Star Wars in terms of being focused on a story, the kind of mystery of the Jedi and all that kind of focus. It really works exceptionally well, and now it works even better because it's 60 FPS. I am going to draw this video to a close now, simply because it takes so long to render these and put these videos up. I want to break them down, and I want to get this up to you as quick as possible. And I've seen so many of you asking me to get this video up, so I desperately want to get it to you so you can see it quickly, and then there'll be a part 2 which will cover much more coverage, much more details, much more information, and summarise the whole backwards compatibility. Now remember, on this one and that one, please give me feedback on what titles you want me to cover ahead of launch, so I'll get another third community requested backwards compatibility test video up, which will just cover titles you've told me to test, if I've got access to them, of course, but I do have quite a good catalogue, so hopefully I will. And also just to remind everyone, this is a part-time gig. I don't do this full-time. This is a side project that I do. I'm completely self-funded and independent, so anything you can do to help is subscribe, share this video, share my other videos, and get my numbers up, because that really helps improve the quality and coverage that I can get across these games and the industry as a whole. And it really helps if I can get to some levels that I think is indicative of the quality of content that I put up. Anyway, enough rambling about me. Be sure to check back for part 2 very soon, because it has some exceptionally detailed information and some comparisons that you might find very interesting, just to find out just how powerful the PS5 CPU actually is, with some real world PC examples like for like. It's quite interesting, and there's much more in that video. I'll catch you soon on the next one.
Something moving over there. Take him out.
Yes, be afraid. Strike him quickly. You will fall before me. Quick, take him down. Get on him. Jedi are nothing but traitors. You cannot defeat me. Plug it. Your fate is sealed. Fight me, traitor.
Let's get going, BD1. No guards.